a lot of times you're competing with yourself just as much as you're competing with other operators. And that's interesting, right? Like when you're trying to, you have, I don't know, we'll call it 34 bedroom listings all within a 2 mile square of each other. You're competing with yourself just as much as you're competing with other operators. And that's a little bit different focus in the hotel space. Rarely, if ever, are you actually competing with yourself and your own interests. So that adds another layer to balance.
Welcome to RevLabs by PriceLabs.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of RevLabs by PriceLabs. Today's episode is part of our Your Life as a Revenue Manager series. This series is all about the people behind large portfolios, the decisions they make, the challenges they face, and how they've grown into their roles. I'm your host today, Aviva, and I'm joined by Preston from YourPad, who helps to manage revenue for about 300 listings in the Charleston area. Hi, Preston.
Hello.
How are you?
Fantastic. How are you today?
Great. Why don't we start with talking about what pulled you into revenue management in the first place?
Sure. So probably most people who've been in revenue management a while, fell into it by accident. I was working in the hotel industry in Tallahassee, Florida, while going to grad school at Florida State. I was working on my master's in econ, economics. And I was front office manager at a hotel. Kind of didn't like it. Wasn't an ops person. Wasn't a great hotel either, to be honest. But there was a job description or a job posting for the DoubleTree Tallahassee, for something called a revenue manager, which I had never heard of. But reading the job description, I was like, hey, this is what I'm studying in school on a daily basis. Let's give it a shot. So I applied, interviewed. Within 24 hours of the interview, had the job. And that was the beginning of a 23-year career now in revenue management. It took off. Progressively grew over 12 years with Hilton, left, went independent for a little while, joined up with Intercontinental Hotels Group for another, we'll call it 12 years. And then about 15 months ago, joined YourPad as their director of revenue and jumped into the short-term rentals space.
Nice. That's a very long and interesting journey to bring you to Charleston and revenue management. Is there a big difference that you find between managing revenue for one hotel or many hotels and short-term rentals?
Ultimately within revenue management, the core of what revenue management function is the same for any kind of industry, right? You have supply demand and you're trying to balance supply and demand with price, right? So that's just the basic core function of revenue management, distilled to its most basic level. So that doesn't change between hotels, short-term rentals, cruise ships, airlines, car rentals, kind of everything in the hospitality space. We're all trying to solve that same basic function. There are a lot of things in the short-term rental that make it easier. We don't have hundreds of price points and an seemingly infinite number of distribution platforms that we deal with on the hotel space. But at the same time, you're dealing with a completely different customer base, I think. And you're dealing with, in this case, I've got, again, we've 290 listings, I think, technically as of today that are live. And a lot of times you're competing with yourself just as much as you're competing with other operators. And that's interesting, right? Like when you're trying to, you have, I don't know, we'll call it 34 bedroom listings all within a 2 mile square of each other. You're competing with yourself just as much as you're competing with other operators. And that's a little bit different focus in the hotel space. Rarely, if ever, are you actually competing with yourself and your own interests. So that adds another layer to balance.
Right. Yeah. How do you manage, in any given week? How do you think your typical week looks like for revenue management?
It's hard, right? Because there's always a fire that needs to be put out or something new that needs to be addressed. But as a whole, I try to have a basic idea of this is what a Monday looks like. This is what a Tuesday looks like, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, etc. So that way I have, certain things that I'll accomplish. Like every Monday, I'm going to look to see what booked over the weekend. Where are things standing with the market? How are we pacing? Kind of what bigger trends have happened. So what's happened week over week? Our busiest reservation dates are Friday, Saturday, Sundays. So what's picked up over that Friday, Saturday, Sunday? Kind of make whatever holistic big picture changes need to be made. Tuesdays, I focus on just new units, kind of what's happening from the newer listings we've picked up. There's always new listings, so that's kind of a good way to focus on that. Wednesdays, I look at our key collections. We have a good bunch of key collections. And then Thursdays and Fridays, I'm looking at anything outside of the immediate booking window, right? So the immediate booking window is being looked at daily, but anything beyond that, Thursdays, whatever rolled in from the 365-day window, I'm ensuring that week is set up a year out. Fridays, anything that's really admin-y or anything outside of that, we'll call it 6-month to 12-month window, kind of taking another look at. And then, sprinkling in things that haven't really moved over the last week, things that are maybe moved too much over the last week, specific areas that may be, or properties that may be pacing ahead, too far ahead or too far behind, and kind of drilling into what may be causing that, and just identifying opportunities in those spaces. So, structured, but also it's a little loose because we're always having to adapt to something. I also do all of the business like performance. So if anyone's interested in joining YourPad or has a listing they want to bring to market, I sit down and do all the analysis for that before we, say yes to a particular owner on whether or not we think their property is something that fits what we're doing.
Wow. That's a lot on your plate.
Yeah. Yeah. And since we've grown so much since over the 15 months I've been here, it started like, oh, this is not too bad, and now it's like, oh, there's always something going on. So we'll probably be adding some help here over the next 6 to 9 months, so to
Nice.
Just be able to stay on top of everything.
Aside from checking your immediate booking window daily, are there any other like key metrics or indicators that you like to make sure to look at every single day?
Every single day, I mean, man, the kind of the daily change, like what's picked up, is always something that I look at every reservation that's been made. If nothing else, it makes me just ensure that I haven't missed something from a pricing perspective, right? Obviously, we use PriceLabs, and we have the hyper local pulse models on every single listing, but there's always areas for opportunity, right? Maybe the system's not picking up on something it should, and so we need to tweak rates up. Maybe it's over projecting a certain weekend and we need to pull it back, but I'm always looking for something like that out of the daily data. I try not to get caught up in the daily changes from a market perspective. So, depending on just exactly how reservations or bookings flow in, daily fluctuations, I try not to get too stuck on, but ultimately just trying to find opportunities and the needles in the haystacks, if you will.
Let's think back to your journey as a revenue manager. Is there anything you think that somebody who's just getting started now should make sure to do or make sure to learn that you found especially helpful given your background?
Yeah, so and I used to do revenue management training for both Hilton and Intercontinental Hotels Group. So one of the things that I liked about the corporate hotel space that I don't know if has made it over to the short-term rental, and maybe it will at some point, but the learning of the theory, right? The underlying principles and what you're actually trying to accomplish, from how do you create a strategy? How do you use a system to execute that strategy without becoming reliant on the system? That's where I would challenge anyone who's trying to get into space now to learn, not just how to push the buttons, not just how to use technology. Technology is very important. It makes our job as revenue managers easier. It helps us to actually find those needles in a haystack easier than you would if you were just having to comb through data manually. But how do you actually use that to create a strategy and to take advantage of opportunities before systems start to recognize trends, because that's how you can win in the margins and beat, especially from a competition standpoint, right? If you're picking up on things or noticing things before a system starts to reflect it, or before your competitors do, then it allows you to kind of win in those margins. And that's where theory and understanding principles comes into place.
Cool. In terms of like using those systems in your day to day, is there anything that like you find in PriceLabs that you've become reliant on, or that you tend to use more than any other systems? I mean, ignoring obviously the fact that we control your rates, but like if you think about portfolio analytics or like market dashboards, what's a non-revenue part of PriceLabs that you find yourself turning to?
I don't know if it's every day, but at least a couple times a week now, I'm in the listing optimizer, which is new, right? I've only had access to it for 18 days, which is probably finding it more often now than anything. Mainly because for us, it's already shown in just the couple of weeks we've been using it to be able to improve our listing health and help kind of fix, we'll say, stale listings without it having to be through price, right? So it's not going to be a daily tool moving forward, but trying to work through 290 listings, it's, as soon as possible. Our busiest booking period is about 2 weeks away. So the more we can get done over these next 2 weeks, even with holidays coming up, the better position we'll be for the first of the year. So trying to push through some stuff before the end of the year. So I've been in that a lot. I'm in portfolio analytics almost daily to look and be able to manipulate data in the ways that makes it easier for me to take action on. Whether that's through looking at things through groups or special tags or bedroom counts, and being able to compare that with market data in a very clean and efficient manner. So I use portfolio analytics almost daily. Some stuff I'm still having to export and kind of do my own little extra layer on, but for the most part, I've been able to structure almost everything in portfolio analytics to the exact way I need to see it. So I'm using that pretty much daily in some form or fashion, in addition to just my market dashboard or, custom comp sets. All of that is helpful.
Yeah. Which part of portfolio analytics is your more go-to? Like, are you a report builder person or like a pacing charts person?
So report builder, but only because I've built out all of my reports to kind of structure things in the way that's easiest for me to take action on. So I've got 20 different reports that I'm using on a regular basis that I've created, but it's things for pacing, where I can just go change the filter really quick and the exact information I'm looking for, or change the window. And it's got all the information already on the screen in one place where I'm not having to go back and forth and look for everything. So yeah, I would say the report builder is probably the most. Booking, I'm only now looking at bookings in PriceLabs. I don't bother to look at them in my PMS because of the ease of filtering, the ease of grouping by property or grouping by tag or grouping by arrival date or grouping by book date. All of those ways that I need to look at bookings, revenue, ADR and revenue, just the ability to filter on the fly. Whereas in the PMS, I'm going to have to download all that data, and then it's going to get probably put into a CSV that's going to be emailed, not even just download directly. It's going to be emailed. Then I have to go check my email. Then I have to download it. Like, it's just so many extra steps because the PMS has just made that difficult. Where in PriceLabs, it's really quick. I can take care of it all in 75% less time. So that's become a daily use as well. So
nice. I like report builder a lot too, just from an internal perspective. Like when we do account reviews or anything, being able to pull your individual metrics and look at them in a flexible way, whether it's day by day or month by month.
Yep.
Yeah, super handy.
Very, very helpful.
Yeah. Is there any feature in PriceLabs that like we don't have that you wish we would have?
And I know it's being worked on, but net accommodation fare, right? So rental revenue net of channel fees, with the Airbnb fees moving, right? And for those of us on PMSs in October in the United States, the rest of the world I know was already there. Everybody else who's not on a connected PMS will be there, I think the first of the year, so like in a couple of weeks. But now we have, but to count how many different distribution channels we have. I don't know, we'll say half a dozen distribution channels, all with different host fee structures. So for me, the only way to kind of really look at, top line revenue, apples to apples compared to history, is now at a net accommodation fare view. So that's become more important, and I know it's being worked on. So that'll be nice to see. I would love to see kind of weekend, weekday ADRs that aren't blended, but that's less of a barn burner for me to net accommodation fare, right? Because if I remember correctly, and from everything I've seen right now, our PMS is blending the ADRs when they're being sent down for bookings, right? So if it's a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday booking, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we're all priced differently, but that ADR is being blended. And while as a whole, I'm good with seeing it blended, the ability to kind of drill down and see, to isolate when ADRs are maybe down a little bit year over year, was it just because we added an extra weeknight versus the weekend being underpriced, for example? So those are some, again, that one's pretty minor, but the net accommodation fare is the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of people who would love to see the actual ADR from a booking rather than that blended ADR.
Yeah, and some of that's PMS limitations, right? Some of this stuff, software as a service is built by people who see opportunities for the software, not necessarily built by people who actually, have gotten into the nitty gritty and needing to use it, right? So a lot of it's adaptable, and they're changing too, and they're adapting to their clients' needs. And I think as things like revenue management and short-term rentals becomes more professionalized and catches up to kind of where the airline, hotel, cruise line space has been for the last almost 2 decades, you'll see, we'll see some of those needs evolve and be filled.
Yeah. Since you brought up short-term rentals being professionalized, is there anything that how do you see STR continuing to evolve over the next 5-10 years?
Professionalization is probably the best way, right? The kind of fly by the seat of your pants, just make just quick adjustments and not necessarily rooted in data and analytics, I think is going to start to change. It's going to have to, right? A lot of our markets have become pretty saturated, and you have to start becoming a lot more strategic. The distribution channels are changing a lot as well, which is forcing that. You just can't solve things by price, right? I think STRs as a whole, especially in the United States, got a big bump in, what was that, 2021, that, I think helped accelerate the field, right? Or the industry. But now that's kind of subsided, and you're going to have to operate at a much higher professional level across the entire operation to be able to compete and stay moving forward.
Yeah. Technology wise, is there anything you see changing with STRs or being evolved in ways that you find exciting?
So far, the dip that everybody's taken into AI, I've been very pleased with, right? Whether that's through kind of some of the ability to analyze listings at a listing health perspective, and using AI that kind of help with that and find areas of opportunities to improve overall just how you're positioning your listings, I think has shown some gain. Other systems that we use have introduced AI into other areas to kind of help focus where there might be opportunities being missed from a strategy perspective, but for my job, which sometimes I already knew. Sometimes it's like, oh, hey, this was something I hadn't really picked up on. Let me just take another look at it. And maybe it's picking up on something that's not really, I don't know, it could be a false flag, but sometimes it's picking up stuff that, this one little area was falling a little bit behind. And, when you're managing major, larger portfolios, sometimes you miss those one little things. And by fixing that one little thing or making improvements to that one little thing, it can have a big impact on maybe not your portfolio numbers, but those owners that have those listings don't feel like they're getting left behind, right? So sometimes it's just a perception, saying, hey, we saw this one little thing. It only impacted like these 5 listings out of 500, but we've made some adjustments to it. And the people who have those 5 listings or own those 5 listings probably feel really good about the fact that you noticed that one little thing with them and you're tweaking it.
Yeah. Is there any like AI tool that you find yourself starting to use more frequently besides listing optimizer?
So Key Data is testing a new AI dev studio, which I've started to use a little bit more, which again is helpful. There's some areas of improvement, obviously with most of the new stuff that will help, I think, tailor it a little more, but I see the potential there. And so I'm starting to use that a little bit more often. Again, mainly tweaking and finding areas of opportunity that I probably, it's hard to find, maybe identify quickly with the human eye. And the one listing out of hundreds that may be falling a little bit behind for a specific booking window. It's helping to identify some of those things. Again, filterability, being able to tailor it to specific unit types, I think would make some radical improvements there. But it's new and it's being tested, and we're part of the test. So far, I'm finding it to be very helpful.
That's really cool. Yeah. I am also like super impressed with the minutia that things are, the tiny bits of information that some of these tools can pick up on.
Yeah, and again, sometimes it's wrong, but sometimes it's that one little thing that it's right about actually makes a big difference. And from a time perspective, it's not like it's taking a lot of time to sift through the recommendations to figure out what's useful and what's not. So
yeah,
it takes a lot less time to sift through the actual recommendations than it does to go through everything to find those recommendations to begin with.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? So yeah.
Is there any part of like your life as a revenue manager that you see changing in the next 5 years? I mean, it sounds like your team is going to grow. Is there anything else? Anything you'd like to accomplish?
Man, that's a tough one. Because I wouldn't have expected AI to kind of rush in and become as big of a deal as it is now. If you would have asked me that 5 years ago, but I don't know. For us, I kind of think we're going to see probably some contraction in operators, right? I think holistically we'll see a little bit of that. Like markets will become a little more dense in terms of just fewer, stronger operators instead of many marginal operators. I think those of us who are able to have the resources to adapt to technology and be able to scale up and actually have strategic visions and execution will start to win enough to where other operators who aren't able to keep up or aren't as professional will start to get left by the wayside, and we'll see a little consolidation on that front, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. Over consolidation can turn to be a bad thing, but I think most of our markets can stand to lose 2 or 3 marginal operators, which then lifts the entire ship, right? So if we can get all of just the top operators left with just the top units, then it lifts kind of the whole boat. And I see some of that happening over the next 5 years, but that's probably the biggest shift. OTAs, I mean, those Airbnb testing hotels, I think is going to have an impact on STRs, especially smaller units, studio, 1 bedrooms, things of that nature. Now they're going to be compared directly a lot more competitively with hotels on sites where previously the hotels weren't being disclosed. So I think that's going to have to change a little bit how we think about unit structure and maybe unit mix within a market. So there's some thought process around how will that have an impact. So I see that changing over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
But other than that, new entrants on the OTA side, more use of AI and machine learning. It's not going to end. Outside of that, who knows what the next 5 years is going to bring.
Yeah. I feel like all the big OTAs are now just blending their hotels and STRs. Like Verbo's putting everything on Expedia, Booking's got their mix. Like,
it's going to just become a differentiation is going to just, everybody's so focused on always growing that eventually you reach a point where the only way you can grow is to start doing something different. And, it's just a vicious cycle, right? I think that's why you see in the hotel space an ungodly number of brands that the average consumer can't tell you the difference between half of them, right? And because it's the only way to keep growing. Right? The only way to keep growing is to keep adding more, and more is not always. Eventually, we're going to reach a point where more is not always better. I don't know when that point's going to happen, but we'll get there eventually. So,
is there anything that your pad, as like a property management company, tries to do? I don't know. Maybe this is going to like be giving away a secret, but like to differentiate yourself from other PMs in the area.
I mean, I think at this point your pad is an identity. We've stopped kind of thinking of ourselves as a PMC, and we're a hospitality company at this point. So I think by just, I talk a little bit at the beginning about more professionalism, right? So, I think your pad now is a professional hospitality company first and foremost versus being just a property manager. So I think that's the main point of differentiation we've made in 2025, and that we're going to continue to expand upon in 2026. And it's allowed us to start becoming a lot more selective about the type of units we will and won't take on. It's, when we're starting to think about, do we branch into new markets? It's tailoring our approach to how we think about those new markets. And it's allowed us to become a lot more thoughtful about everything we're doing and adding or subtracting over, from an offering standpoint, how we think about it and how we approach it and how we roll it out. So, I think that's our biggest change so far and our biggest focus moving forward.
I like that idea of thinking of yourself not as a PMC, but as like a full hospitality brand. And also it'll help position yourself, going forward to compete better with hotels. Just providing that level of service that people seem to have started expecting on Airbnb. Like when you look at complaints or anything, people are expecting to check in and get that full level of hospitality service rather than, you think about renting someplace 15, 20 years ago when you would show up with your own towels and your own sheets and like.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that people, and I don't know if this is just because I've only been in this for 15 months, right? But I do remember that where there was a point in time where if you rented an STR somewhere, you were not only expected to, like, maybe you weren't expected to bring your own sheets, but you were definitely expected to take them off the bed and throw them in the washer for somebody, right? And start the laundry, and start the dishwasher. Now, full housekeeping is expected. I'm surprised people aren't expecting daily housekeeping at the houses they're renting. And, I think people forget that they're actually renting a house and they, walk in and expect, an entire chef's kitchen worth of accessories, which, sometimes you can accommodate as a company and sometimes you can't, right? When somebody wants, well, how come my kitchen didn't have an ice cream maker? It's since when did any of us think that an ice cream maker was a standard piece of kitchen equipment? So I don't know. I don't actually know if ice cream maker, it's the first one that came to my head. I think we've had somebody ask for one. So I think that's why it popped in my head. So, but yeah, the level of expectation just continues to increase. And sometimes you think customers forget they're renting, a house, not, a full service experience, but ultimately we're going to have to start moving that way. Right. So,
yeah. Well, I think we are past our time, but I guess that's okay. So wanted to say thank you for sharing your experience and your insight. This was really interesting. If anybody wanted to connect with you on LinkedIn, how would they find you?
I mean, just search my name, Preston Smelt with Your Pad in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm probably going to be the only one there.
I'm also the only Aviva Llorens that I know of in Chicago. So if anybody wants to find me on LinkedIn, that's how. And for everybody who's listening, if you're enjoying the Life of a Revenue Manager series, make sure to subscribe to RevLabs by PriceLabs on your favorite podcast app or service, so you don't miss out on future episodes. So thanks again for joining us, Preston.
Thank you. It was fun.
Yeah. See you soon.